Live.
Hello, guys. Lincoln Terrell here with the first edition of Polarized Perspectives. Have Zach and we'll cut the Jones off. Robin Jones producing the show. Today, I think the best way to start this show off is since it's all centered around the same topic. Zach, can you speak to your last few years' work on polarization and the effects on the American public?
Yeah, I've worked on. It started out with me going down the rabbit hole of conflict and political polarization for my podcast. People who read people. I started out as somebody when Trump got elected. I was often, insulting Trump voters online and doing all this kind of stuff, and then just started to realize that I was just feeding the flames of the toxic divides, right? And the more I started digging into it, the more I saw that this was, a problem that had gone back decades and just kept building with the amount of contempt we had for each other on both sides. That's kind of long story short. It led to me interviewing a lot of people, talking to a lot of people to understand their perspectives better, writing my book, Diffusing American Anger. And then for like the past year and a half, I was working in the polarization space. I was working for a nonprofit a bit called Builders, aka they also call themselves Starts With Us, but trying to make people see that you could embrace these. You could try to take better approaches to conflict, even as you were, no matter your political views, no matter how angry you were, to see how we all can feed the flames of division, and we can. When we act contemptuously towards each other, we actually shift, our opponent's stances. We actually help create the very pushback that we're angry about in many cases. So that's what I focus on, this self-reinforcing aspect. When we contemptuously insult the other side, we're actually helping create the very dynamics that bother us. So that's kind of what I focus on.
Yeah. Pam, what have you particularly experienced in Colorado and then also online? I mean, I know that you're politically active. Can you speak to the extremes that you've seen, the behaviors, how things have changed over the last few years or the last decade, maybe?
I never really got into politics until just 9 years ago. Honestly, it was always poker, 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 and never paid attention. When I was my mom's living caregiver, she was questioning Trump. Who is he? What was he about? And I saw the media just kind of going off that all the they were going haywire. Haywire. I mean, everybody loved Trump before he came down that golden escalator and said that he was running for president, and then everybody hated on him. And I saw the hate, and I'm like, I don't understand what's going on. I didn't get into politics, and so like you, I went down many rabbit holes. I mean, sometimes I got stuck and I couldn't get back out, and just seeing the hate in people. I mean, we used to be able to sit there and joke like a Democrat did this or that, back in the day, and now it's like if you wear a MAGA hat, my God, you get chased down the subway and you get attacked. Or if you say you're a Democrat or a liberal, you get hate and you get attacked. We went to several protests with Tesla, and we were neutral. And I wanted to get interviews from both sides, and the amount of hate and the vulgar and people slamming their hands in your face and just the language telling you to F off and go F yourself. And my reply was, Jesus loves you. Hey, Jesus loves you. He loves us all. And he turned around and said, fuck Megan, fuck Jesus. And I'm like, how did we get so ugly as a nation when we all used to get along? And the division is just gross. It's sickening. It's repulsive. I don't understand it. I don't know why people have. I personally, I'm sorry, but I blame the media. They're pushing this hatred Nazi narrative that I'm a Nazi because I'm MAGA. I mean, I'm ultra MAGA now. I mean, I was on the Trump train when he walked down that escalator. I believe in America first, and I believe in what he's doing. He's got a hell of a fight against him. We've got this radical justice system going against him. We've got the other party going out in the streets and just blowing up shit, blowing up Tesla, and it's unbelievable. It's not cool. We don't roll this way in America. We all get along. We're all God's children. How did we get so tainted? And I blame the media because they pushed the hate and the division to a point where I don't know if there's going to be an end to it or what. I'm kind of scared.
There's so many people who early on when Trump first announced, before the previous campaign, the only thing that I could think of that I was what I was excited about at that time was I was like, okay, I see this whole push for bringing the voices of people who don't participate in politics too heavily, and that kind of possibly in some people's eyes. So we thought we had representation for the people in the country, the people not in large, in big cities, and the people, the common person's voice, blue class worker, a white collar, manager or CEO of a small company, the transportation industry, just everyday people. I mean, like coal miners are starting to participate in politics at that point, right? And depending on your perspective, of course, that turned into a lot of people who, I'm not speaking to the whole, but I'm just saying there are a lot of ignorant people who don't know much about politics. They aren't highly educated, who jumped on the Trump support train. And I think that's part of what created such a divide, is that now you have, educated liberals versus a large portion of the Republican demographic, the support groups, being so uneducated. And instead of interviewing people who can speak well, like yourself, Pam, or people like Rich, the media in some ways went out and started interviewing people who have never spoken on camera in their lives, and acting like that's a good representation of of Republican support or whatever. And then from the other perspective, like now, you realize that some 20 or 30% of the people voting for Trump have never really voted in their lives or cared about it. Not the other 70 or 80% like you, Pam, or like Rich, but Rich, can you take a second and speak to that dynamic? I mean, do you think that caused a lot of the divide and the hate groups on both sides at the extremes, which most normal everyday people on both sides aren't that
I think,
extreme?
well, first of all, by way of introduction, just so people know who I am, I was vice president of the Poker Players Alliance for a long time, and until the very end. And I had a podcast on OnTilt Radio, which I enjoyed having, and which we also had until Poker Players Alliance wrapped up. And we dealt with people on both sides of the aisle. Our membership was on both sides. The politicians who supported us were on both sides. The politicians who opposed us were on both sides. We got very used to just dealing with everybody. And me as a person, I've always had friends on both sides. And now the polarization, I think it's due to a few things. One is media. You make more money by being in media on one side or the other. Look who draws the highest ratings on cable news. It's Fox and MSNBC. CNN was, they're trying to find their spot on the far left, and it's not really giving them any money. So they just keep creeping that way. In the primaries and the elections, if you want to get elected, you kind of have to be hard on one side or the other. David Hogg over at the DNC just said he wants to spend $20 million to unseat what he deems to be ineffective Democrats, which I would assume to mean centrists. And there's always been a push on the right to get the rhinos out of office and replace them at the primary level with stronger conservatives. So there's kind of an across the board push to be really strong one way or another. And I think we see it daily, like Pam was seeing with the Tesla situation. I mean, well, we weren't drinking Bud Light. We weren't vandalizing the store selling it. We weren't assaulting people for drinking it. But now that's what you're seeing with Tesla, which is strange. It's like these people think Elon still owns those Teslas that were pretty much sold to environmentalists who are actually trying to do what the left seems to be, very much in favor of, is the environmentalist message and doing what people can do on their own to support that. But the push is so strong that you see people actually physically attacking others over their political beliefs. So it's just kind of it's that happened in our country in the 1800s. Even after the Civil War, it continued, but it's been a long time. It's kind of a resurgent thing that is a bit surprising, and you see it all over. You see it on social media. You see it on mainstream news. You start to distrust what you hear on the news, even on the outlets that call themselves mainstream. Um, I want to leave with one anecdote because I just read it and I want to share it now because it's right on topic. The producer of 60 Minutes just resigned abruptly today. He said it's because he can't put his message out the way he deemed fit. Now, we've seen 60 Minutes take a pretty hard shift to the left. They clearly edited a Kamala Harris interview to be in her favor. I don't think anybody can credibly deny that on either side. And I'm not saying they're the only ones who do it, but and this is a major source, and that's just what he said was this. That's how you should be able to cover media and cover the news. And I think that's what we're seeing. I think we're seeing it across the board. I don't know how to undo it.
Zach, you mentioned to me that you wanted to talk about how contemptuous ways of acting help create the very things we're upset by, and that the far left drives the far right drives the far left. Would you like to speak to that dynamic?
Yeah, I think. I think the thing I see, you all have described things that bother you on the left, right? And I think the important thing to see, the thing that stands out to me more and more after thinking about these things the last few years is, I think we just have to face the fact that it's very easy for people to form very pessimistic narratives of the other side, depending on how they filter for things, right? Like, so just as you all have described valid things to be angry about on the left, there's people that will filter for all the negative things on the right to build their narratives of how horrible the right is, right? And they'll reach for things like, and you guys will have disagreements with this, right? But I'm just describing what people are using to form their narratives. They'll point to like Trump denying the election, people supporting that. They'll point to January 6th. They'll point to like various violent things that, Trump supporters have done. And of course, we'll all have ways to be like, well, no, people listening to your things on the left will be like, well, your stories aren't valid for X, Y, Z reasons. Like we'll all have our reasons for why the other side's narratives and their grievances are not valid, right? But the thing to me is just seeing how easy it is for rational, well-meaning, compassionate people to form entirely different narratives. And these can be valid narratives. I'm not getting into whose narratives are more right or who's wrong, because I think you all have described things that bother me too, right? Like these are things that bother many people. It's just a matter of like what they prioritize and what they filter for, right? Like, to give an example, I'm not trying to focus on you, Rich, to score points or to denigrate you. It's like, but I was looking at your social media feed today, and you go pretty hard at people in terms of like insulting them and calling them out and such. And I'm like, I think we all have done that in various ways, and like these are all the things that form our opinions of like they're being mean to us in all these ways, like violence or just insults online or whatever it may be. They're trying to be undemocratic and subvert and harming the government or harming America in various ways. So I just think, to me, once you start seeing that, it really makes you feel like, oh, maybe I should not be a part of that equation and try to understand like what bothers these people, why they can see us as the bad guys, even as I think they are very wrong and I still fight against them, right? That's kind of what has motivated me, because as I said, I was somebody who started out 2016, like, making these righteous, insulting things I said about Trump voters, but then as I went on, I understood what their grievances were, and a lot of the grievances are about the things you guys have said. Like, there is a lot of bad stuff on the left that is angering, right? So that's kind of how I see it in a nutshell. And I think also I could go into more detail about how I see like Trump's approach making the far left more powerful, and then the far left's approach making like more hardcore things on the right. I think they feed into each other, and I'm not the only person that says this. Like multiple people have talked about, like, how the highly aggressive and insulting ways we treat each other help create the very pushback who sees us as evil and paints us as evil, and they're the most extreme people. So they, it empowers them more, and they empower the other side more. So that's just say that's how I see it. Yeah.
Okay, respond.
Pam.
It's okay, respond.
Yeah, sure, Rich.
Now, I kind of divide it in two lines. I mean, we've seen over the past 4 years just huge, or right up until Trump won the election, really strong push toward the left, like open borders, education systems that were really disregarding a lot of parents what they wanted to see in the education, just in favor of what we kind of sometimes deem the woke agenda. And there's been just a strong pushback. So you'll see when I do a lot of social media commentary, if I'm commenting on somebody who's put themselves out there as a politician or a leader, I don't mind kind of really calling them out for the position, because we have to push the other direction. And I had the same thing happen to me when I was vice president of the Poker Players Alliance. If somebody didn't like it, they were going to call me out, and I accepted that I'm in that role, and I don't really get personally angry at them. I just would try to explain what was going on, because that's just part of the responsibility of taking on such a thing. But when it comes to like regular people, we have some friendly jabs, but I have lots of friends on the left. I've never been one of those people who just pushes people away because of their political beliefs. I have seen more of that, to be honest, on the left, of people pushing white people on the right. And I know there's some people on the right who push white people on the left too. But that's kind of how I take it. So I still have lots of friends. If I have people that are just regular folks that I'm commenting on with or chatting with on social media, I never really call them out or tell them they're terrible people. I just talk about the ideas and how I disagree with the thought processes and maybe the media influences that are part and parcel to all of that. I think that's a dividing line, and I don't think I think anybody should be able to call it any politician. Like for the poker fight, I called out lots of Republicans like Spencer Bacchus and all sorts, and Sheldon Adelson, lots of other people who were opposed to us. I never held back on any of them, and with good reason. They deserved what they got. If you got to be in a position and you say something like, I want to ban poker, or I think vandalizing Teslas shouldn't be considered anything more than a misdemeanor. It shouldn't be, which has come out of the left, things like that. Those people deserve some pushback. And if you're in a position of leadership, I think we should be. And the same thing happened on the left. It's not like they're holding back against Trump or leaders in the Republican Party either, or even libertarian leaders. So that's kind of where I take it from. But yeah. Zach, if you comment on my page, I'll never insult you as a person. I might say, hey, that's a weird idea.
Well, yeah,
but, I'll never say you're a bad person.
I wasn't trying to call you out as an extreme example of this. It was more like, but I think maybe you can see how
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I think there's many ways that we all behave in ways that make it easy for our opponents to view us as the bad guys. Like, there's just so many, and especially like let's say, especially in a country of 340 million people. Like, there's always going to be people acting badly, and like let's take a common narrative on the left. There's often a thing about a narrative of like filtering for like these far right associated people who have killed many people, kind of like these people that have done mass killings, right? That's a common narrative on the left. They'll be like, well, you won't find you won't find far left people who have done X, Y, Z. So what we do as groups in conflict, we're always trying to find the things that they do or that we perceive that they do that we don't do, right? So each side builds their narratives of like, obviously there is all sorts of this Tesla stuff. There's all sorts of bad college, far left violence and shouting people down, and that's part of the fact that the left has dominated these cultural institutions, right? They have dominated academia, they dominated news media, they dominated entertainment media. So they really have inculcated a lot of these ideas, many of which I disagree with, like you all. And so that's to say, that's an asymmetry with the groups, right? Because conservatives will be like, well, we're not doing these things on college campuses. but like liberals will have things that they reach for, like Trump speaks in more insulting ways than other, politicians, and this is unusual, right? Like that's one asymmetry. But you could view, Trump's power as being related to the fact that people were pushing back against the fact that liberals are dominating all these institutions and areas, right? So then the thing that stands out to me is just the complexity of the conflict and how we can build these narratives about the other side being the bad guys, no matter which side we're on. And it'll kind of make sense to us depending just on what stories we put together. And I didn't mean to single you out, Rich. I saw you saying something like Timmy AWOLs and, it was like some pointed stuff about Tim Waltz, I guess. Huh? You're a weird dude, but my point wasn't to denigrate you. It was just to say many of us are speaking in these like really aggressive ways to each other, which is understandable. Like we're free to do that and we're free to speak, our minds. It's just that those are the kind of things that stands out to me. Like I see my mom engage with people online and like she insults people insult her back. And then it just builds up,
I think that if you don't mind me putting in once more, and then I'll let you go, Lincoln. But I got just real quick. The thing with with Tim Waltz is he called us weird first. Yeah. Sometimes when everybody's firing out, you just have to be even at a point. But no, I hear you on that one.
But we all have our narratives about who started it first, right? Like people who voted for Trump are like, well, they've been denigrating our beliefs for 20 years plus, and then there's always like a narrative of like, well, they did it to us first and they did it worse. But anyway, these are the things that sounded to me just, and it doesn't mean we can't disagree strongly. That's my thing, is like, my view is like, yeah, we can fight hard for whatever we believe. And I think when you start seeing how easy it is for people to see you as the bad guy, it kind of changes how you approach the conflict and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I intentionally call them AWOLs for a specific reason. I think media has refused to cover the story. And I think they've even admitted many times they filter things through with this help Trump. And I think that's part of it. So that's another reason I just specifically put it out there that way. It's not really necessarily an attack on. It's an attack on him to a degree, but it's an attack on the system. It's an attack on the way media cover a lot of stories. And I don't want to take Lincoln's time. Well, now he's gone. But
no, I get you. I didn't mean to single you. I was more just trying to call attention to, like, I just happened to glance at y'all's social media before that, so I thought I could, use it as a chance.
I'm post on social media and I'm here on the program. I'm open game.
You can find all the crazy things I said a few years ago if you go looking for them. I'm not saying your stuff is crazy. I'm saying, I've engaged in my fair share of that stuff too. Yeah.
A few years ago, actually, before I started paying attention to his work and talking with Andrew Barber and Zach a bit when Dusty Schmidt was alive, we kind of had a disagreement for a little while. And I think at one point in time, maybe 6 or so years ago, I told Zach and Andrew Barber, I hope that they both, burned up in a grease fire. I mean, that's how extreme my views had gotten and how I felt at the time. And I didn't mean it literally, but the anger that exists on all sides, I finally saw that I can have my views and I can disagree with person A or person C and love person B or whatever, and still get along with everyone if I just approach it the right way and I'm more gentle with the way that I disagree to some extent. Maybe I think what Rich might possibly, I'm not speaking for you, but what you might kind of be referencing is it's hard to respond to someone who is, vehemently attacking you and your character and your person and your beliefs with a mild response. I mean, I kind of get that, right? Something that Zach pointed out to talk about, in reference to these things is the anti-racism movements, and then the racism that still does exist in some places with some people. Pam, you happen to be up in Colorado. That's got to be like one of the hottest places that this whole thing has been centering, because when Deion Sanders brought his program or brought his way of doing things into the Colorado football program, you saw an influx of like hip hop culture and rappers and a lot of people came from the east and the south up into Colorado, and you guys have your your demographics where you have a lot of predominantly white country type people, and then you have the city of Denver, which is like super liberal. So, like, how have you seen the ultra liberals and then the ultra conservatives clashing in Colorado? Have you experienced that at all on media or in person?
Every day. Every day. I wouldn't say we're country people. We're more like mountain people. And you FAFO, and but that's how we roll in Colorado. But yeah, um, our governor is, I think he's lost his one flew over the cuckoo's nest here. They're trying to ram this transgender stuff in schools down our throat, and I don't believe in that. I grew up with gay kids. I got several best friends that I grew up with that are gay, and I knew it in elementary school. I didn't care. I went to drag shows back in the 70s before they were cool, when it was beautiful and they had class. I don't believe in transgenders having children's hour at the library dressed in the dirty drag that they're in. That's unacceptable to me. I don't believe that children should be taught that you were born in the wrong body. I was a coach for 17 years and I took care of the kids down here. I was a volunteer youth sports coach and I made sure that they were protected. And I don't like the bills that are being passed up in Denver. We're trying to fight them tooth and nail. This DEI, CRT, this crap has got to go out of the schools. These kids need our help. I've been screaming for years. And so I feel that it's my duty to come back out. I was going to coach again, but I don't think a 67-year-old can run up and down a soccer field anymore. So I've decided to run for school board. I want to help these kids. Kids need our help because what you see out on the streets right now is a product of our education. And it's been going on for years. And it's unacceptable. I grew up, I didn't hate anybody. I was colorblind. I had black boyfriends in school. I'm not racist. I'm not homophobe. But I do not believe in this transgender with little kids. If you want to do it when you're 18, do it. Don't twist their little minds. Let them be kids, man. Let them go out, play, have a good time. Don't tell them what they should do, and don't tell them how to think. Little kids need to learn critical thinking on their own. And that's one of my big reasons out here in Colorado. We don't have much of a racist problem out here. Never have, really, in Colorado. Everybody gets along. They're with our governor up there. I think he's just lost it. He's really weird. And I don't like weirdness and like that. I mean, if you want to be weird, wear different colored socks, but not twist. Shut up. Carlos laughing at me. You don't twist little kids' minds. And so I'm running to protect my community and be a voice for my parents because, my God, if parents went to the school board and objected to the curriculum that's being taught in the schools, or some dad's daughter was raped in the bathroom because they got these open bathrooms and open gender neutral bathrooms. No balls in girl stalls. I don't believe in men and women's sports. That's not cool. You want to play co-ed? Do that. I'm sorry, but that's Colorado is twisted. We're sick, like, and it's gross.
Basically, you're pointing out the agendas of extremists being displayed through the use of using children to get across their viewpoints. I've wondered myself about when things are pushed onto children. At one point in time, I have so many experiences politically and just personal experiences. In Portland, Oregon, I remember Dusty literally had to go to the school board and write a letter and then go and visit them because he didn't want his children being taught that they weren't born a particular gender, or and that they could choose. And he felt like it was a bit of an agenda being pushed on to the children, rather than just America being about freedom and liberty. Um, I guess I would let Rich kind of speak on the extremism that exists and talk about what is your experience with transgenderism, your views, and what have you experienced personally? Which area of the country do you
Well,
live
I
in,
live in
Rich?
Kentucky, northern Kentucky, so it's just outside Cincinnati. So it's really Midwestern. I haven't personally experienced a lot with it. I've never had anything against transgender people or gay people, especially gay people. I never had any kind of issue with them, with gay people getting married. I never really bought into that part of the agenda of some on the right, because people think the right is a monolith, but it's really kind of, there are like three stools. There's social conservatism, there's libertarian conservatism, there's more of fiscal conservatism. I've always been part of the latter two, and I've kind of been opposed to the former, especially with the they came out against poker pretty hard, and so we're already didn't want that end of the party legislating for us. Kind of turned them me from just kind of not liking it to being an actual opponent of that part of the of using big government conservatism to push a means to an end. So I was always happy, if adult gay people want to be married and live their lives, that's always been fine with me. But I agree with Pam on the transgender issue, where when it comes to the children, and we do see pushes for that kind of stuff around here. They're not nearly as prevalent. They're not really going to push a lot of men and women's sports around here, but obviously we hear about it worldwide, nationwide, and our athletes are still impacted by it because a male somewhere else might set a record uh, that'll impact. And of course Riley Gaines is from here, and she had big issues over at University of Kentucky with a student from a different school, which is a pretty big story, and she's one of ours. So these things happen. They didn't have to. I don't understand it. The LGBT movement was going very well, and for some reason they reached so far further than they had to. There's really no need when it comes to equality for the LGBT community to be able for men, biological males, to play in women's sports. It's not the female part of female sports has nothing to do with how you feel. If you feel like a woman, it's about biology. That's why it's segregated. If it weren't that way, it would just be all co-ed sports. It's the only reason it's separated. And it's another reason, and Zach, especially what we're talking about with the how society is so separated now. Well, a lot of Democrat lawmakers won't vote against any of that because they don't want that negative check mark on their record, and they just want to be pure left, and they'd rather vote against it than even really consider, hey, should especially high school, when you're not taking hormone blockers or anything. Like that's what's happening in Connecticut. They have just pure males. I mean, that's all they are biologically. There's no effort to do anything. They have is long hair and dresses. They're not on any kind of hormone suppressants or anything, and they're competing against biological women. And that's the type of thing that's just going to ring hollow to most of the country. And again, I've actually talked to a lot of transgender people online about this. I say, hey, you're winning. It's like you're grasping defeat from the jaws of victory. And they privately responded to me every single one of them. Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of these activists are extreme, and they've just gone way too far on this issue. And I just don't understand it. When you take the person who was all in favor of gay people getting married, and then all of a sudden you start branding me as some kind of bigot because I don't think a high school or middle school girl should have a person with biologically male genitalia undressing in front of them is some kind of radical position. It's just a big turnoff, I think. And um, if I were providing any kind of advice to them, it would be to kind of back off of that stuff and stick with the stuff that 70-80% of the American people support, and just cruise along with it like they had been for so long.
Yeah, definitely. I think things have gotten really extreme with that. I mean, especially when you see things like someone having you know talking about there being like 60 or 70 genders or something like this. I mean, I've looked into the science, and I've looked into the biologies, biological studies and things like this, and the psychiatrists and psychologists who speak to it. um you know I think that just like trying to balance and not be so extreme with things might help both sides to, both sides of the aisle to kind of get along. Zach, what you live in Portland, right? So you definitely have seen an extreme right versus extreme left, because you have militia even out in some parts of Oregon, and then in the city. At one time, the city was so out of control that you couldn't even walk down the streets in certain parts without stepping on a needle or having problems. Is what I understood. What do you have to say about the extreme and the misrepresentation of the general population?
Well, yeah, I do think. I think what you all are saying is, it gets to the heart of this thing where liberals have too often categorized rational, defensible views as bigoted or racist. These kinds of things. So we saw that. We see that in the transgender/gender debate, and that's. I think for that and for a lot of things, getting back to the self-reinforcing aspect, I would argue that a lot of these things are self-reinforcing, right? So let's say, liberal activists regarding the transgender thing specifically, when they their stances on that, when people take extremely aggressive, demeaning stances to that, like saying it's mental illness or it's these people are sick, it reinforces the left's narratives that this is about. It triggers their narratives around like this is about protecting vulnerable people, right? The same narratives around racism. So they filter the criticism that they get from the other side. They're focusing on the most aggressive criticisms, and it triggers their like, we need to protect this vulnerable community. And then when and so they're more likely to call even rational, defensible views like bigoted, etc. These kinds of things, and which then in turn triggers the right's reaction, which is like, y'all are crazy. These are defensible concerns we have, which they are, defensible worries and fears and anger. Honestly, like I think the transgender and gender issue alone is, I think if you took that away, I think Trump loses the last election. I think that was a huge part of why he won in the last election. I think it's under-examined, but I think more people, when you actually look at the surveys, I think we have more in common on that issue than a lot of people believe. And what Rich said, a lot of Democrat strategists are echoing exactly what Rich said, is like, recognize that many people have defensible views and objections to these things, and don't focus on these things so much. They're not good for you strategically. But I do think there's this, and I would say social media plays a big role in there too, because I think social media has amplified all these things that we're going through. It's like, it's so easy to find everybody saying the most crazy thing on either side, the most crazy polarizing thing on either side on social media, and then those comments get held up, and so it triggers more people, right? People are on the left are like, they're saying all these things, they want to destroy us, we need to go out and mobilize and get out there, and then so that triggers the most angry activists, and then those activists say extreme things, and that triggers on the other side that those comments and those actions are held up, which triggers more people saying stuff or doing stuff aggressively. So just to say, I think it builds. I think the way that we interact with each other, helps build, some of these things that people are bothered by. Like I would argue, if we were less polarized, I would argue that there would be, less of an anti-racism. There would have been less of that, less of those narratives about filtering everything through a racism. Everything's deeply racist kind of narrative. I think there would have been less of that. I think there would be less team-based thinking in general. Like there would be less like anything Trump says is good. Like less kind of team-based thinking. Like whatever Trump does, we'll rally behind. And the same with the left too. I just think all of these things kind of have this self-reinforcing dynamic. I would say on many of the issues we could talk about, many contentious issues we talk about. Yeah, I think, like, for example, I'll give you an example. Like Trump was elected in 2016, and you saw a huge upshoot in like signups for National Socialists of America, or not national, that's Nazis, social Democratic Socialists of America. You saw a big upswing basically, and I think that kind of encapsulates how these dynamics work. It's like people see a threat on the other side, and they're like, "Well, how can we fight this? We're going to be the opposite of those people, right?" And I think that just plays a role in so many things. I think social media is a big part of it.
Zach, you mentioned wanting to talk about how people catastrophize. For example, fears of abolishing police, the things on the right and left, polarizations leading to extreme stuff that will often fade away over time. So you think that there are a lot of issues that come up that really aren't that important to people, but there are persons on the far ends of each of the spectrum who focus on these things and make them bigger than they are.
Well, I think we get kind of swept along in these polarization dynamics. It's like, say 2020. Personally, I think a lot of the craziness on both sides in that era was a lot due to COVID and like existential stress of what we experienced during COVID and uncertainty and stress and fear. I mean, I felt some of that, and I could see how people would be like, "Oh, screw it! I don't know what the future holds. I'm just going to go out and get swept along in these various, the high anger things." But I do think there's an element of like conflict naturally leads to people getting swept along in like team-based ways of thinking, right? So like even as I was highly critical of some of the liberal side things that I saw around me in Portland in 2020 and 2021, I also felt like as bad as some of that stuff was and as illogical as it was and as team-based as it was, I also felt like, well, a lot of this stuff is just going to fade away because it's how I understood the dynamics to work. It's like we're not going to abolish police. Like that's not going to happen, right? Like, so it doesn't matter how many extreme activists say that, or even how many like people that I wouldn't have expected to say that, who I didn't really believe. I don't think they even believe that we should abolish police, but the slogans and they kind of make sense of the slogans because they have a team-based meaning where it's like, well, we don't really want to abolish police. We don't really want to defund them completely. It just means let's make them better, right? So people get swept along in these various things, which may seem really bad and may have really harmful impacts in various views, on both sides. But like a lot of times, things are not as bad as they seem because the people can only go so far in thinking like, we don't really want these things, and society pushes back in various ways, right? Like, I mean, we saw this. There was also the narrative in 2022 when many liberals thought many Republican candidates were going to start denying election results because of Trump's thing, and there was all this fear. And I was like, I don't think that's going to happen because that's just kind of catastrophizing, what the worst case scenarios are, right? And I think I see that a lot around us of like, conflict makes us reach for the worst case scenarios and imagine like everything's going to go down this really bad outcome because our most extreme opponents are going to win and everything's going to go to hell, right? But I think society has a way of correcting those things. Like as we've seen, it's always kind of correcting back and forth, even if things slip out of whack sometimes. And who knows, it might go off the rails completely. And that's why I work against polarization, because I do think polarization has a way of ramping up the going off the rails part.
Pam, did you want to speak? You're quite animated up there.
How do you feel about all these illegals? Do you think they deserve due process before they're shipped back to their native country? The ones that are MS-13, the ones that are raping and murdering and abusing children and women and police officers. I was personally accosted. We've got a big time illegal problem here in Colorado Springs now that migrated down from Denver because our Fruit Loop governor, decided to make it a sanctuary city. People's benefits have been cut. They did defund the police. Police and firemen's wages were cut to support the illegals. A murder happened right around the corner from my son's doctor's office and my daughter's house. Trende Aragua kidnapped a guy, murdered him, and left him in his car. And the car was in the middle of the street. no more than 30 feet away from my son's doctor's office. But they say they lied up in Denver that Trendeagua wasn't taking over apartment complexes. That's a bold-faced lie. I went up to my store up here, just around the corner from me in my little town, and I was accosted by an illegal because I wouldn't give him money and I wouldn't give him a ride. So I pulled out my safety old bat and I said, "You really don't want to jump at my car and at my face. I'm 67 years old and the death sentence to me is no problem right now. I'm tired of the illegals and I think they all need to be deported. They don't deserve due process. Our Constitution says it's only for legal citizens of the United States. These people walked across our border on Biden's wishes to come on in. We'll do this. We'll do that. They were flown in on a CBP1 app. We've got over 20 million illegals here. They're not going after little farmers in the farmer district picking your crops. They're going after the bad people, and they need to be gone. But we keep getting stopped by the judicial system, and every time it's just 2,500 lawsuits a day are going in court. It's crazy. Why do the Democrats support the illegals? Why are they flying over to El Salvador? Why don't they support the American people? Why don't they support us? Our lives matter. We are Americans. Illegals don't matter. I can understand the ones that come over here because they're really, really in bad turmoil. I welcome them with open arms. But most of the people that came across our border are military-age men. The families weren't separated. The only reason why Trump separated them was to do a DNA test to make sure that the kids belong to the parents. You know how many times those little kids have been recycled across the border so that somebody could claim them as their kid, so they could say we're a family unit and they get let go free? There was no papers to process them coming in. Why should they have due process to go back to their countries? It would take us 300 years to let all these illegals have their due process in court, which they don't deserve. The Alien Enemies Act.
I can tell you that there's definitely a problem. I was hijacked about a year ago. My wife and I, we were carrying a load of beer out of Dallas, Texas, and headed for St. Louis. And before I got out of Dallas, I noticed like 4 cars following me very closely, kind of tucked in close, and they were all similar. And I, just noticed that the whole thing just looked odd, and so I decided to pull off an exit and try and evade whatever was going on, and they ended up catching up and taking my wife hostage, and until I gave up the load that I had. And it turned out that the load that I had, the beer, Mexican beer at Corona to be exact, I'm not trying to point out their brand, that's probably a mistake, but Mexican beer, and there was cocaine in the boxes, and that's what they were after, and they got it. There was an investigation for quite some time. Homeland had to save us. We were both hospitalized for 4 or 5 days in a critical condition. They weren't, I don't know that they intended to leave us alive, but definitely there were MS-13 or some type of organized crime figures involved. We were taken to a yard outside of Dallas a little bit and shoved in the back, and then they offloaded the product, and it was some kind of experience. And then a lot of times when I'm traveling in California, in Southern California, I've noticed quite a bit of activity, being that I came from a city street background in Mobile, Alabama, as a young person. I've seen quite a bit, and it's pretty extreme out there at times in the last couple of years. Rich, do you want to speak to like the illegal immigrants versus people who deserve the due process versus their impact on society?
Oh, absolutely. And first of all, I feel terribly to hear what happened to you and your wife, and I'm glad you're recovering, and outstandingly terrible. And
Yeah.
likewise to you, Pam, for what happened to you. These are just outrageous stories. And Joe Biden just I mean, he just opened the border. The left seems very insistent on an open border. Um, which is ridiculous. So if they just go to Congress, if you want to bring more legal immigrants in, we should vet everybody on their way in. I welcome it, legal immigrants with open arms. We all do. That's how our system has always worked. But let us vet you. The due process thing is interesting because like if you're coming in, if you had MS-13 tattoos on your knuckles, that would be pretty disqualifying. The due process should be kind of that same standard on the way out. Do you have anything that you would have failed to be permitted into the country before you came in illegally? I support. I don't think they're entitled to due process. I don't think the Constitution grants them due process. Or if we put them in jail, it does, but it doesn't for deportation. But I think we should give them something just as good and honest people. But I don't think it has to be a hearing after hearing after hearing, and then an evidentiary standard equivalent to finding somebody guilty of a crime. It should they give you a cursory hearing. Maybe everyone gets a few minutes to prove if they're a U.S. citizen or if they have a right to be here, and it's just a case of mistaken identity. But this whole thing where you get to lay their whole life out for you, like this guy who was just shipped back to El Salvador, which is his country, his home country, his country of citizenship. He's been here over a decade, and then media completely mischaracterized him as this Maryland family man who was mistakenly deported, as if they grabbed the wrong guy, not as if it was just a paperwork snafu and he still had some kind of a lingering court, like an activist judge had given him permission to hang around and stay in the country, deferred his deportation. Although that's hard to say how that's in the purview of the court system and not the purview of the Secretary of State. But now you hear the narrative change now that people are really realizing who he is. Now it's all like, oh, well, it's just wrong because he didn't get due process. Whereas, so we kind of see the whole thing shifting because nobody wants to come out against. Nobody on the left really wants to come out hard against these illegal immigrants and the crisis we have. In fact, they insist on calling them migrants or immigrants. They say the term illegal immigrant is some kind of a slur, like it's an ethnic group when it's just a group of people we don't permit into our country. All of these other countries have far tougher and more stringent requirements for legal and illegal immigration than we do. We're a very welcoming country. We legally have far more open borders than most of the world. And yet we have people calling us calling the right xenophobes and racists merely for wanting to vet the people who come in. Come in, we welcome you, and stop the gaslighting media. We see it. We see it every day. One more comment before I leave it back to you is that it's just for the left, it's a really strange case for them to hang their hat on. There are Americans who had a lot of rights violated by the illegal invasion over the past 4 years. You didn't really hear a peep from the left about a lot of that because it kind of ruined their narrative a bit. And now you hear all of this about this one person, how it's so imperative you have due process. I think it's a bit of a scam because, kind of like Pam alluded to, and I've been writing about it a lot, is that you let them in by the millions, but you deport them one at a time after multiple hearings upon multiple hearings and stays, and trying to find the right judge who'll feel sorry for them and let them stay. It doesn't seem the way the system was envisioned by Congress. It's not the laws that are written. It's a lot of judicial activism, and we see a lot of politicians who need to go to Congress if they want these laws, instead of just trying to force them through the system, where in contrary to U.S. law. And that's not even mentioning, and I'm not going to open the can of worms yet on the sanctuary cities, because I'm going to go over my allotted time, but I'm going to throw that out to whoever wants to discuss that.
That's all right. Go right ahead, Rich, and then I'm going to get back to Zach.
Right.
Make sure he has time for this. Go ahead, Rich.
You got it. But the sanctuary cities are just an outrage. I understand, they're not going to. Not every city has to run their own branch of the police to go out and look for illegal immigrants and try to vet their status. But here in Kentucky, I served on grand jury, and it's just standard procedure to verify citizenship. And because you have to get their driver's license in various ways of identification, so you're going to kind of know who's a citizen and who's not. And these were always brought to us when these cases would come to us if there was a citizenship question. It's not that hard to determine, and they're intentionally not doing it. They're very intentionally not working with ICE. They're allowing a lot of benefits for illegal aliens, which act as a magnet for more of them to come. If we could if we could just stop the magnets for like inducing more people to cross our borders illegally, we'd have a lot of progress right off the bat. And that's just something a lot of politicians, not only do they not want to do, they're kind of afraid to do it. So we've got kind of a multifaceted thing. We have people who don't want to enforce law, who want to pass new laws that kind of embolden this situation locally because they can't pass them nationally. They kind of do it even though their people really don't want those laws. They're kind of beholden. Kind of since the topic of the show is polarization, they're beholden to the far left. Of I'm not saying there aren't other issues where people are beholden to the far right, but this is one where they're going to get their check in the box. Hey, I supported this cause, and we're just seeing a lot of that. And Zach, you said that the transgender issue had a lot to do with Trump getting elected. Well, so did the immigration issue. I do think if
for
those
sure.
two things didn't happen, and if the Democrat Party had a true primary, the election could have gone either way. It would have been it would have been different than how it happened for sure.
Yeah, immigration was the big one. I think immigration was the
Both
main
of
one.
them.
But if you took away the transgender, I think it's like just enough maybe or something. That was how I viewed
Could
it.
have been.
Yeah. Do you want me to? I got to get going soon, Lincoln. So do you want me to like kind of wrap up my own segment and get out of here? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Cover anything you'd like.
Yeah, for the
any plugs you got, go for it.
I was going to say
and check out Zach's book. Books.
I was just going to say on the immigration thing, like, yeah, for my work, I'm less focused on who's right and who's wrong than I am on the ways that we engage with each other. I mean, on the immigration issue too, I just see so much unreasonable polarization. I mean, Democrat strategists have written about the so-called Fox News effect, which is like the tendency for liberals to mock or see as silly concerns on the right, which I think happens on both sides. Like we tend to discount the concerns of our enemies because they're the bad guys, right? I think that just tends to happen, and I see that all over the place. And I think but I do think for people that think liberals have been haven't listened to their viewpoints enough, and that they've been demeaned by liberal-leaning press and pundits and activists and leaders, which I think is a valid thing, a valid dynamic. I do think Trump voters should be curious about what bothers people about Trump and about his approaches, right? And I see a lot of differences in the groups, right? Like people that are voting against liberals and Democrats are largely voting against these specific unpopular range of ideas that they don't like, like immigration, transgender issues, other things. But people who really dislike Trump are largely voting against his personality, like his approaches, like so I think there's a real asymmetry in what drives people, right? And we can build those narratives again in many different ways, because you could be like, yeah, somebody without Trump's personality wouldn't speak the way he did, wouldn't have approached, the 2020 election, lost the way he did, all these kinds of things. And so I think we're largely like building an asymmetrical narrative about the liberal people or anti-Trump people are focused on Trump's approach to disagreement and Trump's approach to conflict. And whereas, anyway, I think I beat that into the ground. But I would say, I do think Trump's voters who see a lot of toxicity and contempt on the left should be curious about the narratives that, anti-Trump people have, the people that are concerned about Trump. For example, read Andrew Sullivan, who has a Substack, and he writes about his views of Trump behaving in really bad ways when it comes to the deportation. And he's a conservative guy who I think who would agree with you all on the immigration issue, but he sees a lot of really bad and harmful things on how Trump is engaging on these things. And that's just to say, we can have these, I think it pays to listen to your opponents on both sides, or like I wish liberal people listen to these conservative views, because even I don't really believe in like liberal conservative labels. I just believe in like a bunch of issues surrounding us, and we start getting into team-based thinking around a bunch of them, and they all kind of combine, and we fight the other side's group of stances. And I just think more people should be curious about like what it is that really bothers the other side and why they're so upset. And I think a lot of times we'll find that there's a lot more rational reasons for their fears than we believe, basically. Even as we, there's also clearly a lot of people that behave in irrational and over the top ways too. But I think the large bulk of Americans, I think, have understandable reasons for, what they do and how they vote and such.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on the show. If you've got to go,
Yeah, it was good
I
talking.
definitely
Good talking to
want
y'all. Yeah,
everyone to.
I appreciate
There's
Rich
that.
and Pam. It was good talking to y'all. I appreciate a good, nice.
Ditto.
That
Thank
way,
you for your
that we
input.
covered some good things, and thank you, Lincoln. Appreciate it.
Let's do it again. I appreciate
Sure.
it.
Thank you, Zach. Really appreciate it. If you guys, if Zach has to go, but Pam, if you want to cover anything on the topic, go for it, and we'll
All
wrap up
right.
soon.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Zach.
I gotta go.
I just think our media is the big problem. Honestly, I think they keep pushing a narrative that is tainting everybody's brains and minds. And thank God for our media and the right wing media, because we have finally got a little ecosystem where we can speak the truth. Because I've always been told honesty is the best policy, because you never have to remember what you said. And I will never jeopardize, I will never be politically correct to jeopardize my honesty ever. I believe in what I believe. I believe in
Yeah,
America first, and I'm MAGA to the core, only because I want to make America great again, like what we used to have it. Like when I grew up as a kid, I want my grands to have the experience and the freedom that I had. I don't want them to have to go to school and say, you were born in the wrong body. You got to take these pills and sexually castrate them, mutilate them. No, that's unacceptable.
or get shot. I mean, or get shot. I
We
mean,
have a
there's another
we have a
school shooting in
killing.
Dallas.
Yeah, we have killings here in Colorado Springs every day, sometimes 3 times a day. And it's always
Wow.
by, guess who? Tren de Aragua, because they're down here now. It's terrifying.
So that's a Hispanic gang,
From Venezuela, yes,
street
the
gang.
ones that are getting repatriated or repatriated or redumped in their own country, in their own prisons. Get them the hell out of my country. Get them the hell out of my state. Our kids are suffering in
It's
schools
crazy.
because teachers have to spend more time trying to translate to the legal little kids. They deserve an education, but by God, so do our kids that their parents are paying taxes for. And to go to a school board and say something about a transgender accosted my daughter in the bathroom, and then we get dubbed as domestic terrorists because we're questioning what's going on in the schools. I praise COVID. I hated COVID, but thank God for COVID, because the kids had to go to school on Zoom, and it let us figure out and learn exactly what was going on in our schools. I'm a huge advocate for our little kids. Kids are my passion. They always have been, and they always will be. And and at least I can say I died trying to help save our kids, because they are our future. And we must never fail them. That's what I got to say.
You have to give me a something to plug for you on that to help get some support on you running for school board and trying to bring back some common sense. Rich, do you want to close with anything, especially like I just mentioned, common sense
Mhm.
and the extremism that goes on both sides. But honestly, I really do see the left pushing further and further across the aisle with trying to make right wing Democrats, Republicans eat their agenda. Just like they think they have the freedom or the liberty to push their agendas on other people. Whereas for the most part, I feel like you see suburb dwelling Republicans trying to just enjoy their own personal space and enjoy their own personal rights and not infringe on anyone,
That's how
right?
I see it. I don't see the right really trying to push much of anything on anybody. I think both sides are affected by. We talked about media, but it's created an echo chamber, and it goes beyond media. It goes through social media, everything else. A lot of people gladly kind of clear out anything that's you know interfering with their echo chamber. So they'll watch media that agree with what they want. They'll listen to they'll use social media and they'll filter it out based on people who agree with them and agree with their thoughts. And then they act really surprised when they encounter someone who disagrees with them. My favorite thing online is if somebody watches a lot of MSNBC and they try something I heard, maybe because I listen to it once in a while, so I know how the other side thinks, and they'll repeat something they heard on Rachel Maddow, and they'll be surprised that there's actually a response to it because they just think it was this argument that has no response because that's what a lot of people consume 100% of the time. And again, it's on both sides, and a lot of people are making a lot of money on it, unfortunately. But that's a lot. That's a lot of what you see. People are not even thinking about the other side. They're like, well, of course you'd want open borders because these people, they're all working farms and they're all giving. They're all like, who's doing our roofing and who's mowing our lawns. Well, I live in the Midwestern. Americans do all that. Maybe not the farming, but the roofing and the lawn mowing and stuff like that. Who cooks in the kitchen? Americans. Um, they seem to think this is something Americans are not willing to do, and it's not true. Americans are hardworking people; they'll do it. They have to put food on the table for their families, and that's what we have here in the Midwest, all across. I grew up in Florida. I didn't even know they had such a thing as American hotel maids, but housekeeping is all throughout the Midwest. There's a bunch of American people doing it. I was kind of shocked, and then when you go to California or Florida or somewhere like that, and all of a sudden, yeah, there would never be someone born in the U.S. doing one of those jobs. But it's not a system where it has to be that way. Media, they're selling us a lot of lies on a lot of situations, and I think this thing with this one MS-13 member who just got shipped off to El Salvador, trying to mischaracterize him as a Maryland man, a loving father, someone who's just providing for his family who had no reason to be deported, just kind of highlights it. But at the same time, we still don't see coverage on the left explaining any of that. If you watch MSNBC or CNN, they're still hammering home this whole idea that this guy never should have been deported. He belongs in the U.S. He's a Maryland man. He belongs in Maryland. We're gonna bring him home. I'm like, they sent him home. They sent him to El Salvador. That's his home. He's a citizen of El Salvador. If he has an issue with how he's being treated, he should take it up with his own government. He never had a right to be here. He had 2 deportation orders. All he did was find an activist judge who put a temporary stay on it, and nobody ever followed up on it. I think we're being lied to by a lot of sources, and I've seen it myself for the poker. I'm really close to this because when I got into poker, um, media like all these the lobbyists had all of media like repeating about how this is going to lead to widespread addiction if people are playing poker on the internet. It's just like college is going to collapse because all the students are going to go crazy from their illegal gambling addictions. And there was nobody on the other side to report about it. And that's just the narrative that took off. When we came in and we had a public relations team, all of a sudden media was actually really thirsty just because it's good journalism to have 2 sides, and there was nobody giving them the second side. And I got to see a lot of it firsthand. You'd be surprised how much, even though people talk about it, there's so much media that's driven by lobbyist positions. They send them these press releases out to people. You have a good publisher media relations team. You'll read your own words in mainstream media. I mean, big mainstream media. You just read. Hey, I wrote that 2 days ago, and I'm seeing it back to me, and something is considered objective. That's how it is. That's how it's always
Listen,
been.
Rich,
Yeah.
something that you probably have to be aware of, but maybe not. I don't know if you know the scope, but maybe you do. I came back to poker after 5 years off. Um, I had some personal issues, and I addressed them and rebuilt my life. And I'm actually about to launch a poker coaching site
Mm-hmm.
with a whole bunch of everyday pros and
Great.
these kinds of things. And I'm heavily active with online poker. The amount of people being robbed by groups of colluders, cheaters, um, multi-accounting going on these apps. When you get the inside information from some of the club owners and people I've been close
Mm-hmm.
to, and the things that they're even willing to openly admit that they know is going on, and they're still supporting the site, the
Yeah.
app that's not even for real money. The American government is murdering their citizens by having them pretty much by out of necessity play on offshore sites constantly that aren't even necessarily regulating or monitoring the behaviors. I could say some of the sites that I'm involved with and the logo that I'm wearing, I know that they have some policing. I mean, I'm thankful for that. But we need regulated, legal poker for everyday Americans, and not sweepstakes sites or not, all this bullshit. Like, we just literally need good, honest poker. and why the government is siding with only the casinos, the land-based, and all their money and their lobbyists, like you said, and not allowing any free enterprise. You can't come in and just start a poker site. You have to partner with someone who's in in the in crowd.
Exactly. That's how it is. These once it comes to gambling, you've never seen like a bigger industry with where lobbyists control it because there's so much money involved. The states think they own a piece of it. It's a little bit different than like selling beer, which is still highly regulated. But even if you want to sell something even less than that, like I can't think of anything that's not regulated. But if you just want to cars, I mean everything's widely regulated these days. But whatever you want to sell, but people do understand, like politicians, that you should be allowed to sell this thing. Not so with gaming. So they look at this, they figure, how do I get my piece of the pie? And all of a sudden you have three parties: the provider, the government, and the people who want to play. And two of those groups want to take money from the players. So you're kind of like outnumbered from the get go. And then you see a lot of infighting, like Colorado. California. People gave us a hard time because we were trying to get this law through, and there are like two divergent factions among the tribal interests, and we're just trying to. And we spoke out against one who was trying to block the other side. And just no, it should go through, and they still don't have it to this day. They don't have sports betting to this day. They had it was on the ballot last time. And they had two competing measures, and they both went down because they both had commercials against one another, and they both got shocked down really hard. So they might never get online sports betting, much less poker. And that's what happens when it's just controlled by these special interests, and you're seeing it. And then what happens to the players? Well, like you said, they got to take their chances offshore. If they're in a state that doesn't have regulated poker, and there are only five that do, and if you're in one of the other 45, you take your chances, and it might not go so well. I don't play any of them myself because I don't trust them. We with PPA offered a good solution where we were addressing all these concerns of collusion. We're very upfront. A lot of these people try to like sweep it under the rug and never. We talked about the solutions we had to that. We even on my podcast with Pam and OnTilt, we would say here's how we're addressing collusion. Here's how we're addressing anyone of the multi-account who's not necessarily colluding, but if they're multi-accounting for different purposes, bonuses, whatever. But you can't really track these things properly. You're not tracking the money. Maybe they're are they money laundering through it, or are they trying to run money from one site to another by chip dumping, all this kind of stuff. We're on top of it all with geolocation. We go to politicians. We never ran from any. We said, well, here's the solution. And so a lot of these people would say, well, like they thought it was a rhetorical question, like, well, how could you stop someone from dumping their chips? And they thought there was no answer to these politicians. They just thought they were actually some kind of rhetorical question, and they looked kind of dumbfounded when we actually answered their question. And now,
Right.
None of this really has anything to do with security of the players. Anything that's going on right now has just got nothing to do with it whatsoever, because there are very good solutions from the U.S. based providers, or at least U.S. accountable providers for that. And these other 45 states they're just shrugging their shoulders about it. So it's got nothing to do with the players. There are no controls for addicted gamblers or anything like that. When they go to an offshore site, these are things that were offered by the free market if they just open it up. And we see it time again from various issues, and poker's one of them, and that's where that is. Like this, and to your point, you got to take your chances. And politicians say, "Well, that was your fault for playing." And that's the extent of their concern.
Sad. Pam, did you have anything you wanted to close with? Hold on for 1 second. I didn't give Rich a chance. Rich, anything that you want to plug, or any agendas that you want to cover?
Yeah, I've actually stepped aside from all this along with PPA left, and I'm just enjoying my life these days. I got no agendas,
That's
nothing
awesome.
for sale, nothing anybody cares about that I'm doing. Just
I care.
my business.
Well, thank you
But
so
follow
much
me on
for-
Facebook and on X if you have any questions. I think feel free to follow what I post. It's both at Rich Muni, RICHMUNY, and that's all.
So that's sad. You tried for years, I remember, and you just you didn't get very far with Congress or with the lawmakers.
Well,
huh?
we had a lot of successes, Actually, I'm really happy with what we did. We got it through to 5 states. We blocked Sheldon Adelson's multi-billion-dollar plan to block it nationwide, which was crazy. A bit of a Pyrrhic victory. I mean, it cost us kind of everything we had left, but hey, we beat a multi-billionaire who had so much influence in Congress. It was insane that we could defeat this guy. Nobody thought we could, and we took him right on. Like I'd write these articles, and I'd say it's all due to one billionaire. Like they'd write an article, it's all due to one billionaire. I edited, comma Sheldon Adelson because they didn't want to mention him by name because they were afraid. Um, Lots of
Yeah.
people, and we pushed, and we just by the skin of our teeth beat that. It was almost going to go into a must pass bill, and they couldn't squeeze it by us and Ron Paul and some other people we got on board to take our side. So we got that. We got the money back for full tilt players, and
Yeah, that was
I thought
amazing.
that was a tough one. The tougher one was Ultimate Bet and Absolute Poker because they weren't planning. They were planning to use that money for helicopters and all sorts of things with the government since they had the money, right? The DOJ had it, and there's lots of stuff the DOJ has that they could spend money on. They're more than happy to. But we said, hey, and they had no plans to give that money back to Ultimate Bet or Absolute Poker players, and they had no reason to because it wasn't really in the case. But we pointed out, and I actually noticed it when I was going through the filing. I talked to a couple lawyers that it said Poker Stars, comma Full Tilt, comma et al. I said, and then they had mentioned Absolute and Ultimate in the filing. I said, hey, et al means you go if you have money for a remission, you have to give it to these guys too. It was like 5 years, 4 years later, and we got them to do it. Another thing, you know what I learned? Sometimes you just have to be there. Like somebody has to be able to go to the DOJ and say, hey, I represent Group X if you want to get something out of them. And if you just have to exist. I mean, you don't have to be that. And you have to know who to talk to. A lot of these groups don't have anybody like that. Poker doesn't have that anymore. There are politicians who said we should have lost our money. It'd be a good lesson not to gamble on these websites, and they're kind of upset that DOJ was facilitating this, but they didn't get very far. I don't think they were trying to do anything more than a soundbite. But these are the things that happen. We had, like I said, we had support on both sides of the aisle. We had opposition on both sides. We're one of those rare groups that could really kind of push through without being ideologically aligned with anybody and having people on the far left opposed to us because they thought it was. A lot of people thought it was like taking advantage of the kind of poor people. They needed protection by government from these websites, and people on the right a lot of times thought it was a moral issue on the far right. So it's one of these things that's kind of like we're talking about polarization on this show, but this is kind of the opposite. This poker was driven from the middle. Even when we had support on the right, it's more of a states' rights thing than it was about wanting to do it. So the ideologues were on the far left and the far right, and the people who were alongside us were kind of in the three quarters of each side over to the center. So it was very unique in that fashion. Um, so no, I was pretty happy with what we were able to get done. I wish we could have gotten all 50 states. We knew from the, I mean, we started off in 2006, the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act passed Congress. It passed in the House as a freestanding bill. It was like 370 something to 93. It was like a 4-to-1 margin. We just got crushed in that vote. And the Senate went through as a must pass bill, but they passed bills earlier that went through unanimously. There was just nobody on our side. And you go from that point to beating back federal bans, getting our money back with the active participation of the DOJ, and getting getting some states to go forward and having a green light for the other 45 to go forward. We think these were just some pretty good victories for what we were doing, and I'm pretty proud to have been part of it all.
I'm glad you pointed all that out. Like I said, I was gone for a while, for a few years,
Mm-hmm.
from being heavily active, and I didn't really realize that PPA had so much to do with all of those things. Those are amazing feats. I mean, I do
Thanks.
remember hearing from some friends in Vegas that Sheldon Adelson was pushing really hard to make sure that online poker was going to be blocked. So I guess all of the progress so far and whatever comes from here, I think every state will, or at least most states will, come along in the next 5 to 10 years and allow some form of legal poker. The only thing is, if it's controlled by certain groups and who already have all of the power in gaming, then it's not really a free market. And it kind of sucks.
It does in a way, but it's safer for the players. I would like a totally free market, and then people would just gravitate toward the safer sites because I go play something US based or even not US based that has a good reputation like PokerStars. You would say, oh well, I'm gonna my money is safe at these sites, and the free market would kind of drive it. But the second place would not be reverse protectionism, where you're actually stopping these sites from offering services and allowing the other ones to offer services. Um, and that's what we had seen in the past. That's what we see now. It depends how much these lawmakers wake up to moving forward on a lot of these. I think industry has to push harder. I think players have to push harder to make it happen. Because online sports betting is kind of sweeping the nation. It hasn't had a lot of. The only roadblocks it's had from competing interests wanting to offer it. There's really nobody in the way of saying no, we shouldn't have it. It's like California only failed because two different people wanted to provide it, or two different groups wanted to provide it, and they couldn't agree how to split the money up, and they had competing ballot measures. But Tennessee, they don't have gambling. They passed sports betting early. The people want it. People are willing to take it. There hasn't been any political repercussions to supporting online sports betting. Poker would be the exact same thing. There are no more impediments now from the federal government. It's kind of smooth sailing now. There's no PASPA anymore. The Supreme Court had overruled that like 6-7 years ago. That's what allows online sports betting to proliferate. So the states are free to move forward if they wish to. The sites are ready if they wish to push it legislatively to send their lobbyists to state capitals. The door is open, so it's kind of up to everybody what they wish to do. But it wasn't open in 2006. It's open today. They just have to walk through.
Pam, that you have anything you want to close with, and anything you want to plug or advertise or talk about?
Well, I'm running for school board. You guys can check out my website at Pamela for WSD3.com. Appreciate a click or a thumbs up or a share, because I'm hoping to win and I want to take our schools back and go poker. We've got sports betting here, and I'd love to see it in Colorado.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And follow OnTilt Radio, because we're back, baby.
Absolutely. Definitely back. And I think hopefully we'll be, partnering for a long time on this and some other things. And it's great talking with you guys. And I think we had a nice show to start off my first political podcast in a few years. And we'll get you guys back on, of course. And we'll be looking forward to, you know what? Actually, I got one thing before we go. You guys obviously both have, if you have ears and eyes, you've heard about the kid who was stabbed in Texas, Austin Metcalf by Carmelo Anthony. Have you guys seen the extreme crazy things that are just like going around social media? And what are your views on this? I mean, how can one side, basically more of the Carmelo Anthony supporters, saying that he was assaulted and he was defending himself, and then there's this crazy things going on about his twin would be charged with his murder, and then I really I've heard that there were threats and things, but I haven't seen a ton of extreme racism from that I've seen from white people on social media. I don't know what the deal is with the Carmelo Anthony supporters and black people and some of the crazy things going on. What have you guys seen, and what do you think about it, and what have you heard about it?
Go ahead, honestly think this is a George Floyd 2.0 for the Democrats. I don't have anything else, and the boy that murdered him is guilty. Daniel Penny in New York saved a bunch of people on a subway. He gets charged with murder. This kid's at his track meet. Carmelo was snooping around trying to steal stuff, got caught, decided to stab. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, but I can't believe that all the people that are backing him have got criminal records themselves. So go look that up.
I didn't even know about I didn't even know about the trying to steal things. I really didn't. That's what he was up to, going through different tents and whatnot.
Trying to steal, yes, sir.
Wow.
Why even load yourself with the knife? I mean, are they going to ban knives next?
I was wondering what he was doing at someone's random tent. Like, just were you there for trouble? Were you there for what was going on? Rich, what are you hearing in Kentucky?
I've never heard any kind of racial angle on it. I've just heard it discussed as one guy stabbed another guy, not a black guy
Yeah,
stabbed a white guy.
exactly.
I haven't
Yeah,
heard anything racial, but from the left, it's weird. They almost just like say, well, because he's black, it must be a racial
right.
issue. Although race hasn't come up. It hasn't. It's not only that it hasn't come up in terms of the person, but it hasn't come up in terms of the dynamic either. That there's some kind of bad blood or anything between them because of skin color. I haven't heard anything like that. It's just I've heard it. I've always heard the discussion on the right is more of a kind of more law and order thing. As I say, somebody got attacked, and it's weird they're letting this guy just go cool his heels at his house, and for some reason people are taking a side that hey, that's just fine. He reacted properly by killing this guy, like killing this kid with a knife. It's I don't understand how they keep taking the wrong. I think I don't know. I think Trump is messing with people's minds. He has the Democrats taking the 10% side of every issue. Um, it's okay. We shouldn't send MS-13 members to their own countries. We didn't send him to a foreign country. We sent him to his own home. You should defend murderers. You should. I mean, the transgender middle school girls should be exposed to a naked biological boy in their locker rooms. They're just taking these weird issues that they don't have to. You could side with civil rights and not take the side that somebody shouldn't kill an unarmed person with a knife, or that someone should have gender expression and identity without the locker room issues. It's kind of like an all or nothing for them because I think they're so beholden to the lobby groups and to the special interests, and both sides are guilty of that. But I think Trump has a special skill right now. He's really got them taking the 10% side of about every issue. And that's how he won the election last time. And now he's got nothing to lose because he's not running for
Yeah, it
reelection. So he can
seems that
just
way.
run
It's
on his agenda, and he's doing it. And the people, and that's where you wonder why he's got such strong support on the right. Well, he's doing everything he said he's going to do. We're used to these politicians saying, "I'm going to do this," and then they backtrack to like 80% of it. And Trump just he's only doing what he said he was going to do.
yeah, and it's wild to me that I've noticed it for years because my grandfather taught me when I was young, like I was 6, 7, 8 years old. Son, if we don't stop letting China have so much manufacturing power and export so many goods to us and these kinds of things, they're gonna just like we're gonna empower their economies and not ours. And now the economy is so globalized that it seems damn near impossible to even attempt to strengthen American manufacturing. Elon Musk instantly is moving into India, and when I go to ports to pick up lumber and steel and these kind of things, like there's Chinese cheap steel coming in, and Russian lumber, and supporting seemingly our enemies rather than dealing with mostly our allies. I don't really fully understand it, but I get called an idiot whenever I say that we should try and bring manufacturing more heavily back towards America, and that in the U.S. we could source a lot of things from American businesses rather than foreign businesses. I understand cutting costs and all that. I do. I work for a company who cuts costs by having their home offices in Poland, but they're Polish people, and Poland is our
Mhm.
ally. I mean, they're our foothold in that
Yeah.
region. That's a little different than giving a bunch of power to China or Russia or.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I'll favor free trade, and what you say about getting cheaper steel from China and lumber from Russia. I mean, those are probably good things. We get cheaper stuff, but we should be able to they should reciprocate to us. We should be able to sell our stuff there. If you want to manufacture in China, you have to have a Chinese partner who steals all your intellectual property. If you want to have a if you want to import things in Russia, you're at risk of having your industry nationalized as soon as there's an issue like we have right now, where all of our American holdings are basically taken by the state. Um, and then they throw up these same tariff walls and trade walls on us that the left is complaining about us doing in a reciprocal fashion. Now, I personally would oppose protectionism. I understand your point, but I don't mind. I support Trump putting up all of this stuff now as a negotiating tactic to make sure we can sell our products over there.
Yeah.
I'll take their lumber if they'll buy stuff we manufacture here. If they'll take all of our food that we grow, a lot of our technical stuff that we offer, they'll send our airplanes back that were manufactured um, in the U.S. These types of
That's
things,
a great point. Yeah,
you know.
reciprocation and balance, right?
Exactly. If we can't make it cheaply enough for foreign markets, that's our
Sorry, I
fault.
think I cut out and I
Oh no,
thought,
it's not.
yeah, but yeah, if we have balance.
Go ahead. I didn't try to over talk you. I guess you cut
No,
out.
good point. I love hearing it. I mean, I'm not. No, no, sir. No, I'm not an economist. Obviously, that's quite clear, and I learn every day, and that's why we talk, and that's why we discuss things. And I just hope that most reasonable people can start to talk things out and discuss them and hear other opinions. And it's gotten to where it seems like now you're one or the other, and centrist and people in the middle, which most of us are really centrist. I mean, most of us aren't hardcore extreme leftist or extreme rightist, and we're somewhere in the center of the spectrum. Pam, thanks for facilitating this show, you and Robin, and I guess I'll see you guys next week for another edition, and we'll kick off the poker show soon. And Rich, thanks so much for coming on, and enjoy your life, man, without having to push any
Thanks,
agendas.
Lincoln. And thanks, Pam. And Rob.